Welcome back to JD Wire. If you're enjoying the content, please remember to like this video, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button.
So every year in New Delhi, something pretty remarkable happens. You've got the world's top leaders, diplomats, and generals all flying in. But it's not for the G20 or a UN summit. It's for a conversation, a really important conversation about who runs the world and who's going to run it next. Let's dive into this year's Raisina Dialogue and figure out why it's becoming such a critical stage for our world in transition. Right off the bat, you need to know this isn't just another conference. Even the name, Raisina, comes from Raisina Hill, which is basically the seat of Indian government. The message here is very, very deliberate. The conversations that matter are happening here, now. It's a signal that India isn't just a player in global affairs anymore. It wants to be one of the architects drawing the blueprints. And the scale? It's just staggering. I mean, this thing started out pretty small back in 2016, and it's just exploded in a decade. This year, in 2026, we're talking over 2,700 people from 110 different countries. You've got heads of state, foreign ministers, tech CEOs, military commanders, all under one roof. When you get that kind of gravity in one place, you know something important is going down. So, to really get why a forum like Raisina is becoming so vital, we gotta zoom out and look at the bigger picture. The entire global order, the way things have worked for decades, is shifting under our feet. And that's creating this vacuum that new platforms and, well, new powers are rushing to fill. You know, what's really fascinating about the conversations at Raisina is just how openly people talk about this. That whole post-Cold War period, where it felt like one superpower was setting all the rules, well, that's over. It's giving way to something much messier, much more competitive. With the rise of China, India, and other powers, the unipolar world is now without a doubt a multipolar one. So, if the old system is breaking down, what replaces it? The answer that you heard over and over again at Raisina is this idea, plurilateralism. Basically, instead of waiting around for these massive, slow-moving global institutions to do something, countries are forming these quick, flexible little groups to tackle specific problems. Think about groups like the Quad or I2U2. This is the new way things are getting done. Okay, and this is exactly where India's unique strategy clicks into place. In a world that's kind of fracturing into competing teams, India is trying to position itself not as a member of any one camp, but as something else entirely. And that brings us to this really key idea, Vishwamitra, which translates to friend of the world. This is how India sees itself strategically. It works super closely with the US and the Quad, but it also buys Russian oil and is a core member of BRICS. The point isn't to choose a side, it's to be the one power independent enough to connect all the sides. This chart does a great job of showing you exactly where Raisina fits in. You've got Davos, right? That's where the world of big money and global finance meets. Then you have the Munich Security Conference, which is all about the transatlantic military alliance. But Raisina is different. It's hosted by a leader of the global south, and it puts geopolitics, technology, and the strategic use of economics front and center, all from a non-Western point of view. And look, this isn't just India's opinion of itself. Leaders from all over the world are saying the same thing. When the president of Finland, a brand new NATO member, by the way, says this in his keynote speech, that carries a ton of weight. It's a huge external validation of India's argument that it deserves a bigger role on the world stage, maybe even a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. All right, this brings us to what was probably the most critical battleground at Raisina 2026, the struggle to write the rules for the technology that's going to define our future. I mean, the conversations around artificial intelligence were just electric, because the stakes couldn't be higher. The question isn't just about who builds the best AI. It's about who gets to define what AI is allowed to do, who writes its ethical code. Is it going to be Western values? Is it going to be China's model of state control? Or can a third way emerge, one that's focused on digital independence for the developing world? That is the debate India is trying to lead. Now, all this intense debate wasn't just talk. It actually led to the single biggest announcement of the entire conference, a concrete step for India to go from being a country that just accepts the rules of technology to one that actually helps write them. And that is the Raisina Science Diplomacy Initiative. What is it? Well, it basically makes technology a central part of India's foreign policy, with three really clear goals. First, get in the game of shaping global AI standards, making sure they reflect a global South perspective on safety and ethics. Second, Build new, resilient supply chains for things like semiconductors so the world isn't dependent on one single country. And third, promote India's own model for digital public infrastructure, like its game-changing UPI payment system as a sort of open-source blueprint for other developing countries to use. So yeah, this all sounds really impressive, but it brings us to the big question, the one you have to ask. Can a conference, a dialogue, actually change global policy? Can all this talk really change the world? It's a totally fair question, right? After all the handshakes are done and everyone flies home, what's actually different? Does this convening power that India is so carefully building with Raisina, does it have any real teeth? Well, when you boil it all down, the takeaways from this year are pretty clear. The idea of a multipolar world isn't a debate anymore, it's just a fact. These small, flexible, plurilateral groups are how things get done now. India's role as a friend of the world is gaining real traction, and it's using that role to become a leader for the global south, especially in this high-stakes race to govern technology. So here's the bottom line, the thing you have to understand. A forum like Raisina doesn't sign treaties, it doesn't pass laws, but it does something that might be just as important. It builds networks. It pushes new ideas into the mainstream. It shifts the entire intellectual landscape. It changes the conversation, and by changing the conversation, it changes the world in which decisions get made. And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. For decades, if the world needed to talk, it went to Geneva. That was the neutral ground. But as the world's center of gravity shifts, you have to ask, is New Delhi, through forums like this, becoming the new, indispensable city for global conversation? That's the real question Rising a 2026 leaves us with.